Alright, so pretty much in the last episode, I talked about remote events. If you don't understand that, feel free to message me on Discord or Roblox. I'm always available. I also have a help Discord. I will link in the description. I apologize for not uploading in a few days. I was learning Unity C Sharp, so I can teach it for the tutorials next month or whenever the series ends. If you're interested, please subscribe in that or comment, say, hey, I'd enjoy that. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to be teaching remote functions. So, essentially, remote events, they communicate from server to client and client to server, like we discussed. I am going to open up, oh wait, never mind. Oof, I haven't closed that. Um, so remote functions essentially do the same thing, but they return something that you could tell them. They return something to client. They are replicated both ways. There's like exactly like you remote events, but remote functions return something when you've invoked them. So we have a box here. I'm just gonna lay this out. So we have Jimmy again. Hooray, Jimmy. Jimmy's back. Oh yeah. So Jimmy here wants to buy an item. So Jimmy wants to buy an apple, right? And then the server, which is keeping track of all the money, right? The server would be like, how much? Ah, shoot, how do I explain this? So, the server doesn't know that Jimmy wants to buy the apple until we invoke it, and I will explain what that means in a second. So, Jimmy wants to buy the apple, and we just have the server, right? The server here controls everything. This is the client right here. Oh, wow, spelling. So we got a client. Yay. Jimmy is on client. The server is here. This server controls the client, but the client cannot control the server like I discussed in my remote functions video. Now, we have a middleman right here, right? So we can either use a remote event or a remote function. So let's say Jimmy does want to actually buy an apple and he's not just telling his friends that he wants to buy an apple because he's cool. So in that case, Jimmy would say, hey, I want to buy an apple. He will click the buy button. So Jimmy got the apple, but the server does not know Jimmy got the apple. So the server's like, no way Jimmy has an apple. He's not cool enough for that. So to make him cool enough for that, we need to make a remote function or a remote event. So in this case we're using remote functions, so we use remote function. So essentially what a remote function is, it's just like a remote event. Ooh, I didn't know I can use those last time. That's cool. So Jimmy buys the apple. We tell the server, Jimmy wants to buy an apple, right? Then the remote function is like, okay, I got it. Jimmy wants to buy an apple. Apple. Right? So it tells the server that Jimmy requested an apple, right? So now we know, hey, the server picks up, okay, so Jimmy wants to buy the apple. Jimmy wants to buy an apple, right? It sends the request. Now the server is like, okay. So does Jimmy have enough money to buy that apple? If Jimmy has enough money to buy the apple, then it would say, okay, well, let me say, okay, so I'm going to give Jimmy the apple. let's not do that. Let's actually make another box. So then that, is there a down arrow? Yeah. So then, if it's okay, Jimmy can buy the apple. And now Jimmy has the apple. And then remote functions can actually return that to the client, like this. It literally will go here and say, okay, Jimmy got the apple. And it will put the apple in Jimmy's backpack. Alright, so he bought the apple. Now let me actually explain that in programming. So we're going to put a remote function. And we're going to call this buy. Right. Then we need a script, obviously, to keep track of that. If you don't know what I'm doing, I have videos explaining exactly what I'm doing. So this script is going to be called manager. And I am going to get the buy remote equals game to replicated storage, wherever your path to the remote is. In this case, it's from my replicated storage. And instead of with remote events, you use server on server event. In this case, you actually had to do something really different, and it's quite confusing to get down. You have to go buy dot on server invoke equals function, and then it returns player and the I'm gonna give it player and the apple, right, or the item, and then it makes a function. So in this case, I'm actually gonna print player and item because I haven't set up the function yet. So I'm just gonna make a small little GUI like this. If you would like me to make a screen GUI scripting tutorials, please let me know. I'll do that after this series. Bye. So I'm gonna create a little frame. It doesn't, this is just a rough draft of what it's gonna look like. It's not, this is just for explaining. So this is the apple. So we're gonna name this apple. I'm gonna put a butt image in here. I'm gonna do local buttons equals script.parent get children. You talked about that in our table video. If you don't understand that, leave a comment or ask help in the Discord. Then I'm gonna do a for loop. I talked about these in my for loops and how they work with get children. For index buttons and iPairs buttons do. So this will get all the buttons that are here. But if you now run it now without defining what a button is, then it will say, okay, this is not a button and we can't do that. This is a button. So to do that, if buttons is, this is a function that's built into Roblox, I can actually open that in Object Browse. Where in the world is... I don't feel like looking for that right now, I'm gonna be honest. It's somewhere in there. If you look, you'll find it. So this basically says if the object is if it is a object type. So if it is a part, if it is a GUI, if it is a button, if it is a script. That's essentially what this does, and we'll do text button. Then we could, and then we can connect it to a function. Mouse button one click, which essentially fires the button. So now I have a function connected to the buttons. I talked about this in my functions video. So if you need help, go rewatch that or ask for questions in the Discord. I also need to invoke the server. So I'm going to get the event like we did. I need to get the function like we did with remote events. Remember when I fired my gun, I fired the server. In this case, I'm actually going to invoke the server. It's different because remote functions cannot be fired, they have to be invoked. And also remote events cannot be fired, they must be shoot. Remote events must be fired. They cannot be invoked. Sorry about that. Oof. Alright, so then I'm going to get the buy remote, game.replicated storage. Again, it's just the path to your remote function here. Then I'm going to do buy invoke on client invoke, or no, invoke. So, and then I'm going to do Apple. So now when I click, actually I could just do text.name, button.name. So I can't do that, I'll have to do button, because buttons is already assigned. So I'll just do button.name, and it should actually be sent. Basically, let me just show you this. So if you look in our output, it'll say, hey, SamJ22 wants an apple. Because I am actually invoking the server here, and I'm invoking the buy function, the buy remote function, and I'm saying, hey, I want the button.name, which is this right here. Let me open up my player GUI. Buy. And it's saying, hey, I want this right here. It'll get the name of this button.name, which is Apple, and that's why it's saying that. Okay, so now I need to check the price. If I'm just going to do a simple if item, if item dot equals Apple, then I'm going to make a part in server storage. Yeah, I'm going to call this Apple. I'm actually not going to make it buy. I'll teach that in my bindable functions and bindable events videos, because that's a little complicated right now, because I have to teach you how to set up player stats and all this stuff. And we're going to do Apple. So game.server storage, and then the item name, which is Apple. This is a string. The reason I'm doing this is because Apple is a string, and instead of doing .apple or .item like this, because item is not a valid member of server storage, you can't just do that. You actually have to put it in parentheses because it's a string, and it's not already there, because it'll get the item name. If the item is spider, for instance, it will get the spider with this. If it's an apple, it'll get apple. If this is called pear and the item name is pear, it would get that item. Then I'm going to clone it, and I'm going to set this local clone equals that. I'm going to do clone.parent equals game.workspace, just to show you guys, hey, it actually works and I'm not making this up. And there we go, we notice we have a quote-unquote apple. So now I need to say, hey, so Jimmy just bought an apple and I want to go ahead and put it inside of the backpack. So I'm going to do clone.parent equals player.backpack, right? This will set it to the player backpack, and that means that if it's a tool, Jimmy can now equip the tool. Please, yeah, there we go. We go to backpack, we notice Jimmy has an apple. So now you may be saying, well, cool, that's what remote events did. Well, there's where you're wrong. You can actually return a variable. You can do return true. If, all right, if good equals, if good, then return true, or return, yeah. No, I can just return good. And if everything's good, good equals true, then it'll return true. Then I can go back to this right here and do local good equals this, right? Then we'll do good equals, then we can print out good, and we'll notice it says good is true. I can also return strings, I can return objects, I can return good things. See, look, now we say, hey, so Jimmy, it's true, Jimmy does actually have an apple now. This is good if you want to make sure the player cannot buy a certain amount of items. So like if Jimmy can only have one apple, you can limit him to one apple by doing that. By returning true, so Jimmy does have an apple. So Jimmy, now we know that Jimmy has an apple, right? So then I'm gonna do it again, and we can say, hey, Jimmy has true. So, and it's in my backpack. It's not in workspace. See, now Jimmy has like 6 apples. So what if we want to make sure that Jimmy can only buy 1 apple? Well, we can do this. So we're returning true, and then we can do local good up here, right? And then we can do good equals this. And then we can do if, and I'm going to return false. So like instead of returning true, because true, if Jimmy can buy, then he's good, and he can buy. If he can't buy, it's false, you know? So I'm going to do that, so it's going to return false. And I'm going to do if good not is good, if good, then invoke the server and we're good. Otherwise, Jimmy won't be able to buy the apple, and we'll notice we'll print good out. So it should be false the first time, and it should not change. So we notice, hey, wait a minute, why isn't it printing anymore? Because Jimmy already has 1 apple, and if we go to his thing, we say, hey, he has 1 apple. That's what remote functions are very good for, making sure players cannot buy 77 items of the only thing they can have won. They can also check if something hits something, like if you're making a gun and you want to check if it returns a variable and stuff like that. Now, I can also return 2 items. I can do string, right? And I could do string. So string right now is nil because I didn't assign it to anything, so I can do look at this, return bought. And hopefully it'll, yeah. See, now we said, okay, so now Jimmy can't buy it because he already bought one. He just bought one, so he can't buy it. So false, he can't buy another one. So now we can even return the apple if we wanted to. We can go apple. We can return the clone. So I'm going to return the apple. And then we go here and we go to, and then we do apple. So then I'll print out the apple, and then I'll make the apple the parent to, and then I'll wait a second. And we'll set it to game my workspace. So I'll show you what that looks like now. So we buy the apple, it says the apple's bought, and now we notice, hey, it's right here now. Look, the apple's here. But if we go to server, we will notice that the apple's not there because it's not done on server. So that's, if you wanted to actually make it in the workspace, you'd have to fire an event, or I would recommend an event for changing the parent of something, or removing something from the game, or moving an item, because it doesn't replicate. So you could use a remote function, but it wouldn't really be useful. But now we notice that on server, it's still in his backpack right here, but on client, it's not in the backpack, it's actually in the thing. So if I wanted to bring it back, I could just drag it over there. Now we can do that. Now I can't buy another one because, well, I already bought an apple. And that's essentially how remote functions work. You can make guns with them, you can make stores, you could buy anything. Just, you could do anything with them, really. Within Roblox limitations, obviously. But if you have any questions or need help, just message me on Discord or on Roblox. If you liked the video, please like it. If you did not like the video, don't like it, and tell me why you didn't like the video. I appreciate it. Thanks.